Hello, Lama.
Hi, Claudia. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to your kitchen. And we've been looking forward to this with a certain amount of trepidation, haven't we?
We did, actually. Exciting.
Yeah, but I've eaten some of Lama's food before and it is really fantastic. So, first of all, shall we introduce ourselves? You go first, Lama.
So my name is Lama and I live in Canberra. I have two beautiful girls and I come from Palestine. My mom comes from Nablus, the city of Nablus, and my dad comes from the city of Jenin. And yeah, what about you, Claudia? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Claudia Hiles, and I've only been to Palestine once. But I suppose it's been in the background of my history because my parents visited in 1941 during the war and we had things in the house. But I'm involved with PIEN and PIEN, and when PIEN suggested, well, they approached me and said, do you know a good cook who lives in Canberra? I said, I sure do. Her name is Lama, and that's why we're here. And I'm a grandma and I've got two children and four great big grandchildren who are all about 6 feet tall. So now I feel like a gnome. But we're here and Lama's done a tremendous amount of work already with preparation, but we are going to do a couple of things, aren't we?
Yep, 3 things actually. We're going to do our frike, which is a really famous traditional dish in the Middle East in general, not only in Palestine. So it's in the Levant area. So you can see it in Lebanon, you can see it in Syria, you can see it in Jordan, and in Palestine, of course. It's the big meal. Let's say when you have a big party, big invitation, somebody dies, somebody, it's the food of, let's say, events and celebrations. And I'm really excited to talk about frike because it's a really interesting dish that has been invented really spontaneously. So the story of it is that during the Crusaders invasion, the Crusaders came into Palestinians and Lebanese borders. They burned the wheat, so people cannot have their crops. What the villagers did, they took the burned wheat and they tried to clean it out. They cooked it, became frike. And that's it.
And they became addicted.
And it became a dish. I learned this dish from my father's grandmother. She passed away in the 1980s. But I spent a lot of time with her in the kitchen. She taught us basically how to clean it, when to eat it, and I'll have more talk about it shortly. The other dish that I wanna do is kafta with tahini, and kafta with tahini is a Palestinian Lebanese dish. The tahini sauce is a really famous sauce that comes from the sesame seeds and paste. The grandmothers used to do it themselves. I'm not that talented. And then the last one is an appetizer. Really, it wasn't really an appetizer at our time. We used to have it as a meal. It's called a light mandula, which is tomatoes with garlic and chili. Really easy, really simple, but really good.
It is really good. I've tasted it before. And just while we're talking about history and tradition, we're starting off the morning in a sensible way with a cup of coffee. But look at these gorgeous biscuits or pastries that Lama has made. And they're very interesting indeed. Lama, tell us about this one in particular.
So we've just finished Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Adha is the Muslim celebration after the pilgrim in Mecca. And this is It's called mamul. And what the origin story of mamul is during Easter. The Palestinian Christians used to do this cookie along with the eggs as a symbol of the Jesus'
Crown of thorns.
crown of thorns.
It looks like a crown.
Exactly, and what we have done,
I'm gonna
it
bite
became it became a really famous, let's say, celebration cookies that we serve them in all of the Palestinian celebrations, so including Easter, including Eid al-Fitr, including Eid al-Adha. So it's I found it really interesting. I found that it represents the harmony of the Palestinian people,
So we're going to start with the chicken dish, Lama.
which is the frike. So what I've done overnight, I did marinate the chicken. You can just marinate it on the spot. It doesn't need to marinate over the night. I cleaned it up the way that my grandma used to clean it. Lots of lemon, a bit of olive oil. I just put all of the spices till it's the mixed spices, and you can get the mix here, Claudia, so people can see. So we call it بهارات مشكلة. My grandma used to do it.
It says on this packet, the mixture is allspice, cloves, coriander, ginger, cardamom, galangal, cinnamon, bay leaves. And I was going to ask you about this, Lama. This is baharat, isn't it?
It's بهارات.
Yes. And some recipes tell you to get ras al hanout. And do you think there's much difference between them?
Yes, so ras al hanout is more of the Moroccan, Algerian type of spices. So it's North African spices. The Levant area, which is Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, we use those baharat mshakale. It's different. It tastes different. It tastes less. How can I say? It's less nutty, I think, and less chili. But it gives you a really good taste.
Yeah.
For the chicken.
Yeah.
For the kafta, what I've done, I have half kilo of minced beef meat and half kilo of the lamb. What I've done, I've got a cup of parsley, a bit of 2 cloves of what is it called? Garlic, and 2 onions. And what you do?
Finely chopped.
Finely chopped. And you put another tablespoon of the mixed spices and half a tablespoon of black pepper, and you just add them to the mix, and you have to mix it.
Something.
Just making sure it's okay. Meanwhile, let's start preparing the alaya. So for the kufta, Teta used to do the tahini sauce at home. So she used to have a really, really big grinder, and she used to keep mixing and mixing until you get the paste.
Gosh.
And it was really good.
And was that an electric grinder?
Nope.
Gosh. So did she have to turn the handle?
Yep. And what we used to do, we used to take the tray of kafta, and it's a really big tray, not a small tray like mine. And we used to take it to the big oven, and in Nablus they had in the really old city big ovens, where people send the trays of whatever, chicken or pasta or they'll keep them there, they'll bake them, and that's it.
And would that be at a baker's?
At a bakery,
Yeah. And that's so
really
that.
big oven ones,
And would that be on a Friday or just any day?
any day.
Any day.
The alaye,
That's a tomato dish.
the tomato dish. It's a vegetarian dish with lots of olive. It's like cherry tomato. The cherry tomato is my invention. Usually my grandma, which is the other grandma,
What would she use?
she used the
Ordinary tomatoes?
ordinary
And would she cut them or just have them?
She would cut them
Yeah.
into fours. But
So this is easy because they retain their shape because of the skin.
Exactly. It looks yummy, more zesty, I think, and normal tomatoes.
I think a picture of Lama's tomato dish appeared on the flyer for this webinar. Beautifully colourful.
Has some garlic cloves. You just throw them anywhere. And what I need to add salt here. Yep.
And what about different kinds of salt? Do you just use ordinary old iodized salt that you buy in the supermarket here?
Yeah.
Or do you buy a particular salt?
No, I don't.
No.
I use the Himalaya salt. Just, yeah, I'm just aware that it's much better. So this is done.
See, that was very quick.
Yeah, that is the dish.
Now
And
all you have to do is cook.
it's a really famous Palestinian and even Jordanian dish that I put it as an appetizer, but we usually have it.
How long does that have to cook, Lama?
An hour on a just really
Very
low,
slow.
Yep, really low temperature,
Yeah.
and that's it.
And everybody's got their recipe sheets, of course. if you've signed up for this webinar, you have the recipes, and you can't go wrong. Well, I think this is, I hope that's mostly mixed, madam. Do you think this is okay?
Yep, perfect. All right, what we need to
Put them into little balls.
do? Yeah.
What size? Golf ball? Smaller?
Smaller.
Ping pong ball?
Yep. And yep, that looks really good. That's it. You can either bake it in the oven, or you can just put a bit of olive oil up, depending on the time that you have. A bit of olive oil in a pan, and just get it in on the oil.
Okay. Shall I put it straight into the pan?
Yep. Right.
Well, I tell you something very funny. I was giving my granddaughter a knitting lesson the other day, and she said, "What are you doing this weekend, Grandma?" I said, "Well, I'm going to do a film shoot on Sunday."
Oh, wow.
And I explained, and she said, "And what are you going to cook?" And I said, "Llama." And she said, "You're going to cook llama?" I said, "No, absolutely not. Llama's my friend who's the fabulous cook."
Oh, that's so funny. I was telling my grandma that we're gonna be cooking her dishes, and she was really excited. So my grandma is an 87-year-old. She's full on. She still cooks a lot.
Where does she live, Lama?
So she lives in Nablus, and my grandma is a very interesting person. She had 9 kids of her own, and with 35 grandchildren. But when I grew up in Palestine, I grew up actually between Palestine and Jordan. So my mom and dad lived in Jordan, and we used to go every summer holiday and every winter holiday to Nablus. And all of us, and when I say all
35 of you.
7 of them was not there at that time. So we were 28 cousins in the same house with 9 aunties and uncles.
Oh.
My grandfather and grandmother, and we're Palestinians. We love family gatherings, and you always get the cousins of my mom and dad, the kids, the neighbors, all the time at the house. And my grandma was absolutely an amazing woman, and I don't know how she do it. Like every single minute in the day, she used to have her table full of food, literally full of food. She would wake up at 5 just to pray, and she'll do her own bread. She'll boil 2. We used to get the milk from the villages around Nablus, and she would get the milk just on the oven, heated for all of us, all of the 28 grandchildren. We will wake up. She would have baked all of the breads for the breakfast, and then it's continuous food preparation all day, just to feed that really big family, all of the relatives, all of the visitors. This was just amazing, and I couldn't really understand at that time.
What an effort it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What a feat.
And it was every single day for 2 or 3 months that we spent in Palestine. She's just amazing. The way that we grew up, we used to go downstairs. So my grandfather's house was 2 stories, and in the first floor, most of our time we spent it in the second floor, but in the first floor she had a full pantry, and it's not a full pantry, it's a big room where she has her ovens, really, and I have some photos of the oven. I'll show you in a while.
I'd love to see that.
The Arabic ovens, she used to get all of the muna, and the muna is the Palestinian pantry, and it's all seasonal preparation, so each of the season will have its own veggies, and that she preserves and she prepares to prepare for the muna. And it was amazing. She used to get us all involved in that food preparation, from cleaning the frike to doing our nuhiya, which is a really famous Palestinian dish, to preparing her own baharat, to picking the peas, doing dried mint. It was continuous preparation across all of the season. Each of the season has its own celebrations and its own different type. And she kept all of us really busy. She was really accommodating. I don't know how she used to do it. I have 2 kids. I cook for them, and I feel like it's just tiring every single day. But she's amazing. Probably what we want to start now is with the frike dish. So what I've done in the morning, I've already seasoned the frike, applied the olive oil until the frike grains are a bit open. It gets all of the oil. Prepared as well a really big onion, cut it into small pieces. I think until the chicken is done, which takes around, I don't know, an hour to 19 minutes, depending on the oven. we'll start preparing. For people who does not know where to get the frika, you can get it from either the health stores or you can get it from the Middle Eastern shops.
Turn it round to the other side of the box.
Yep.
Now people can read it in English.
And what it says, it's the smoked green meat.
So it's smoked after it's been picked, is it?
No, so it is usually picked between April and May. April in Geneva, where my other grandma lives, and May on the other sides of Palestine. So my grandma used to live in Geneva.
So that's in the spring, isn't it?
That's a bit, yeah. It's in the spring and just before the wheat becomes yellow.
Yes.
And the way that they do it, like it's 2 or 3 weeks a year, they get all of the green meat, burn it, and then they clean all of the grains, and it becomes like the smoked green meat.
I see.
And my grandma, the other grandma, used to get us lots and lots of frika because they do all of their money or all of their pantry supplies once a year. So they used to buy it from the farmers, and we used to clean it. What we get now, the really fresh and clean ones, it wasn't that case. So they used to clean it from what is left from the leaves and what is left from the wheat grains. Yeah. As I said, whenever there is a really big event, celebration, either somebody died or it's a big wedding or it's a big celebration or somebody is really important, they usually do the frika and drage.
It's very interesting that what actually was a disaster or appeared to be a disaster when the invading army spoiled the crops turned into
a great
a gourmet treat.
Yeah, exactly. I remember one day, it was during the second Intifada. So my grandma was a really strong woman. It's too hot in Jenin. It's hotter usually than the other areas just because it's not on a mountain. It's a valley, and it's just next to Majbani Amel, which all of the agricultural crops comes in Palestine. And she used to sleep on the porch of her house, and it's an open porch.
Because it was cooler.
It was cooler, and one of the guys who was escaping the Israeli army came, and she hid him under her bed, and there was a lot of frika just on the porch, dried. And they came across and they asked her, "Did you see the guy? He was escaping." And she said, "No." And he said, "Then why is your frika turned is not really smooth?" And she held her stick, and she said, "Go from here, or I'm going to kick you." And they escaped. So that's a nice story of the frika.
Frika to the rescue. How did she dry mint? You mentioned that before.
So we used to pick the mint from the sticks. We put it on, she used to put it on blankets, and we will just keep it not in the sun, in a shaded area, and we will leave it to dry. After it dries, she will just squish it with her hands, and that's it. And she put it in jars, and it's in her new nice pantry.
Well, green herbs occupy quite an important position in Middle Eastern food, don't they?
Oh yes.
Dried and fresh.
Dried and fresh. So we find the za'atar. Probably you know a bit about za'atar. Za'atar is a really famous Palestinian dish that we use it either in cooking or either as a dip. We do also a lot of pasties. We call it menage with that za'atar, and it's dried oregano with some sesame, some of the sumac, which is the sumac is a not
It's
a
a little berry, isn't it?
It's a little berry that's is grown in the Middle East. What they do, they dry it, and yeah,
It's got a lemonish sort of a
lemonish, zesty flavor.
Yeah, nice. And I've recently done a sami tamimi recipe for ice cream, and you sprinkle sumac on the top.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh,
when,
wow.
when you were serving it, it's very nice. It was a strange recipe. It said one of the ingredients was mastic,
Yeah.
and that was a complete mystery to me. And I thought, oh, and it said there's nothing you can substitute for it. If you can't find mastic, just don't even try to substitute anything. And then one day at one of those Middle Eastern grocers, I saw it, and it was in the tiniest little packet, no bigger than a postage stamp, with about 4 grains of this stuff.
Yep.
And I said, well, I think I'll have to put it in my money purse, otherwise I'll lose it on the way home. And I had to grind it up with the sugar. But it is an interesting flavour, isn't it?
It is. Actually, some of these cookies has a bit of mastic.
Really?
Yeah. And we put it as well in the rice pudding.
Yes.
Yeah.
How would you describe the flavour, Lama? I can't put my finger on how it tastes, or my tongue, I should say. I can't describe it.
Yeah, I can describe it as well.
But you can't substitute anything.
No.
So take our word for it.
Exactly. So we do have a rice pudding with mastic. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You should try it one day.
I will one day.
Yeah, I'll do you some.
And then I at another grocer a couple of weeks ago, I saw it again, but it was ready ground, and I thought, well, this makes things easy. And I bought that.
They're good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. It was certainly much easier, but when I smelt it, I thought, ooh, I don't know whether I like the smell of this, but it turns itself into the nice flavour.
What I put here is 2 cups of water. I want to get half cup of tahini.
Have you got any words of wisdom about what kind of tahini to buy?
Something Lebanese or something Jordanian.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't get the Australian ones. Sorry, guys.
I hear that it separates, local stuff separates more. That looks lovely.
Yeah. So you add it with water. I have the lemon juice ready. We use tahini in a lot of dishes, even in sweets.
Yeah.
So the harissa has a bit of tahini here.
It's very delicious.
It is. So my tata used to, so part of the breakfast was a bit of tahini sauce, or do you know the nargila seed?
Yes.
So we do another, not tahini, it's called isha, which is done with nargila seed as well.
Oh, so
we
it's dark
grind
in
it.
colour. It's
Yeah.
black.
And we put a little bit of honey, and that's it, and we dip it. It's really good. And that's part of the breakfast.
Mm.
So
Do you use nigella seeds much?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has nice
Oh, yeah.
seeds. It's really healthy, by the way.
Mhm.
It has lots of,
Good properties.
yeah.
I used some the other day because I couldn't find the poppy seed in my pantry, and I thought, oh, well, this will be just as good, and it was nice.
but they taste a bit different.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, than the poppy seeds.
Yeah, it's got a sharper flavour.
So exactly like the harissa, there is another dish which called isha. My teta and Dean used to do it a lot. I'll just take
On the
Mustache.
recipe sheet, there's the recipe for a delicious cake called Harissa, and Lama's already prepared that, so we'll have a look at that later. Though I believe you've already filmed the preparation of that one, Lama.
Yep, we did. So we're gonna add the filling to it at the end. So what we need to do, we need just to cook the mixture over. So in Palestine, as I said, all of the milk comes fresh to each Palestinian home. So you have a guy with really big jars of milk.
He doesn't bring the cow.
Yeah, he doesn't bring the cow. And he will get for everybody the need. So Teta used to have 2 pots in the oven in the morning. And what is left, she turns that into yogurt.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to have like a big bags of, they call it the yogurt bags. And first she will set the yogurt, and then we call it the Lebanese bags. And that yogurt, that milk either becomes as a yogurt or becomes as a Lebanese. And I'm not really sure if you have tried the Lebanese before.
Yes, but why don't you describe what Lebanese is?
So Lebanese is a creamy cheese. So I'm not really sure if it's a cheese or not, but it's the way that it's being prepared. You prepare the yogurt, you add some salt and a piece of lemon, and just you put it in that bag, and I have the bag. I'll show you the bag.
So it drips.
So it drips. Depending on the texture that you want, if you want it a bit creamy, that you can dip it, or a dip, you can just drain it for a day. If you want it hard and you can turn it into cheesy balls, you wait for 2 or 3 days until it drains all of the water. Teta used to put it in like small balls, just like these balls, and she would preserve it in oil rather than putting it in the fridge after that.
Mm.
Yeah, nice. And when you preserve it in oil, it becomes really sour. So at the end, the texture of the tahini sauce should be just like this.
Sort of like thick cream.
Thick cream, yeah.
Meanwhile, the meatballs are bubbling away here, and the tomato on such a fantastic low heat is bubbling quietly.
Almost done. So we put a bit of olive oil, a really small diced onion, both my grandma and my mom used a lot of hands while cooking.
A lot of other people's hands.
A lot of hands.
Oh, I see. They used their own hands rather than a spoon or a utensil to mix. Yeah.
So I remember my teta used to mix everything with her hands rather than a spoon.
Yeah.
And it always fascinated me.
I'm interested in all the grains that you have in your cooking, and one of the other recipes, the additional recipes, that you gave is for that wonderful rice dish with the crispy onions on the top.
Then drop that out.
Yeah. And I was reading, I've got a very nice book called The Gaza Kitchen, and it said that there's such a shortage of all kinds of things in Gaza, but the rice that is consumed there comes from Egypt, and it's mostly short or medium grain, but the expatriates, the book's actually written by an expatriate Palestinian woman in America, and she says that expatriates develop quite a taste for basmati rice, which is the Pakistani or Indian, originally from Pakistan, rice, which is, I think it's delicious.
It is.
It's a very aromatic, tasty rice, isn't it? So what do you prefer to use in rice?
So most of the Palestinian dishes, we use the Egyptian rice. And I think it's just because of the logistics. So everything comes from that area. And I think the way that the recipes have been developed at that time is from that Egyptian rice, because it just makes sense.
Yeah.
So the short grain rice.
Short grain.
Yeah. Like, we rarely use the basmati rice in any of our dishes. I use that just because I love it.
Yeah.
So when I developed the dishes, but my grandmother didn't know about basmati rice.
No.
We never used that.
It is beautiful rice though.
It is.
And what about the other starchy substitutes for rice and frito? Couscous and the larger version of couscous.
So it's the larger version of couscous. We call it maftoul. And so my grandma and the one in Nablus didn't used to do it. It used to be done with the fellahin. The fellahin are the villagers in Palestine. And the way they do it with their hands, so my tata, the other tata in Jenin, she used to do the maftoul on her hands. So she used to prepare the dough, keep rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, and I don't really understand how she gets the balls.
It's much harder than it looks, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And then they sew it, and not all of the Palestinian kitchens had fridges at that time, and freezers, and she used to dry them and just save them in really big sacks. And it's in the vitamine and then in the
pantry.
Store.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Vitamine and the pantry, the Palestinian pantry is really, really a story. So lots of herbs used basically to meditate everything, including the mermiya, including which is the sage, including za'atar, oregano and thyme. It's each Palestinian woman used to it for medication. If you have a sore tummy, they will give us mermiya. If you have a flu, they will give us chamomile or what we call yansun, the aniseed. It's really amazing. But they have their own pantry that has the medications and the food that is used for the family. So the bowls are now cooked and nice. And what we want to do is get the tahini sauce, get 2 chilies, put them here, put the tahini balls in. For people who like really spicy food, you can add the chili to the meat with parsley and onions. It gives it a really good taste, but just because I have young kids who does not like chili, I put them on the side.
Yeah. better for their stomachs not to eat too much chili.
Yeah. I think it gives it the right taste, but not too spicy.
And, you know, when you look at the map, Palestine, historic Palestine, is not a large country, but there's such a variety in food, isn't there?
Actually, it's amazing. So my husband is from Hebron, and they have a totally different cuisine from us. They cook it really differently. They're from the south of Palestine, and he comes from also a village near Hebron. So his mom comes from Hebron, the city itself, and his dad comes from the village. And the way that they cook in the village is totally different than the way that they cook in the city in Hebron. And it's exactly the same in Nablus, exactly the same in Jenin. So the villages have their own different cuisine, addition to the spices. And it's different from a city to a city and a city to a village. My mom, for example, my mom cooks the green beans without a yogurt mix. My father's family cooks it with a yogurt mix. Both of them taste really beautifully, but it's different. Two different recipes.
So what have you just done now, Lama?
I've just poured the tahini sauce
Over the meatballs.
on the meatballs, and that's it.
Kept it.
And we can just put it in the oven now.
And the chicken's done.
The chicken is almost done. Yeah.
You've got a fantastic size oven. I'm very envious of this.
I just love it because I cook a lot.
Back to the frika.
Back to the frika, and what we want to do is add 2 cups and a half of water and leave it to.
And you're going to add boiling water.
Yeah.
To speed it up, of course.
Just leave it to cook for a while. Cut 4 of the onions, and I just want to add them to the chicken so it can grill a bit before we put it. Add 2 cups. Just 2 cups and a half of water, and we'll leave it to cook for a bit while we prepare the tray of frika. And what I usually use is this really nice pan from IKEA, but you can use any tray. if you
This
want.
is cast iron, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, cast iron.
And you're putting in raw onion,
Onion, yep.
sliced.
Sliced, and you just add it to down the tray. And seriously, you can use any other trays, but you have to cover it really well.
Now the chicken goes on top of that sliced onion.
Yep.
And you pour the juice in as well.
I do pour the juice just because it gives it a good flavor. My teta also puts a bit of ghee on the top of fika when we put the fika in.
A bit of ghee?
Yeah. Gives it a really good taste. And the Arabic ghee is a bit different than the, for example, the Indian ghee. It has a bit of spice. So the big onions are added just to garnish at the end. So the alaya is ready, and we will just sprinkle a bit of sumac on the top. And a bit of salt. And it's done, ready to serve.
Looks good.
Then we'll do the half-cooked fika. See the texture. What we'll do, just add it on the top of the chicken. Now we just kept a bit of the juices that is left from the chicken, and I'll just add it on the top. And then 2 cups of water, 2.5 cups of water. Some ghee for extra taste. You can skip the ghee if you want.
So it's really going to cook by absorption, isn't it? It cooks by absorption. The liquid is absorbed into the fika. Yeah. Great.
This is pure butter ghee. So something else the Palestinian women do is the fresh ghee, and they do it.
They make their own.
Yeah, they make their own. So they do the butter and then they prepare the ghee. They put lots of spices into it, and it's called samna baladiyya. And they preserve it for years.
For years?
For years.
Is margarine used?
No,
Not at all.
Not at all.
It's either oil or
butter.
butter or
Yeah.
ghee.
Yeah. Mostly ghee.
Yeah. And is there a difference in all the different oils you use?
Mostly we use olive oil, and we're really proud of our olive oil.
It's very green, isn't it?
It's very green. So my family comes from a village called Romana. Romana is a really old Roman village. And you can see the Roman ruins across. But most interestingly, you can see the really old olive trees, like 2,000 years of age of olive trees. And the type of oil that is produced, or it's called the Roman oil, and it's just amazing. It's one of the best oils across Palestine.
Now, what you're doing now, you just put some grease first
Yeah,
on the top, and now some foil to make it airtight.
to make it airtight as much as I can.
To seal it.
So I just put a baking paper so the aluminium foil will not touch the food. Yep, and into the
While some of the dishes are in their final stages in the oven, we're having another cup of coffee. This is an essential thing to do. But Lama's already done the harissa, the cake, semolina cake, which she can talk about in a minute. And the tomatoes are finished, the kefta have finished. And so we thought we'd talk about ingredients and where you go and what's important.
So as you have seen, the most important thing I think is our baharat, our spices. We go to the Middle Eastern shops, which is either the Lebanese groceries, mostly the Lebanese. Our pantry, most of our pantry, our ingredients is, you can find it in the supermarket, which is lots of lentils, lots of rice, tomato paste. The tomato paste that is done back home is the fresh tomato paste, or most of the women do like at the end of the life of a tomato, they'll turn it into tomato paste. Nothing is wasted in Palestine, but I just use the ready one. We mostly get the cheeses, the labne, the yogurt from our Middle Eastern shops. You can find everything. The friki, you can get it from there. You can, there's the burghal. I'm not really sure if I talked about the burghal.
No, we didn't talk about that.
Which is crushed wheat. They put it in the tabbouleh. They even cook it with rice. Like whenever our ancestors didn't have rice coming from Egypt, what they used to do, they crush the wheat. They do something called burghal, and they just do it as rice. So you can have exactly the same mjadra, which is the lentils, onions, and you can have it with burghal instead of, you can have it with rice. And it tastes really, really good. They can stuff even the veggies. So we do a lot of stuffed wine leaves, a lot of stuffed zucchini. We stuff, as Palestinian, we stuff everything, literally, including cucumbers,
And do you cook cucumbers stuffed?
We do. We do. So my teta actually does a really nice cooked cucumber. She cooked it with tamardine. And you know the tamardine, I think it's used widely in the Indian kitchen.
Which one?
Tamarind.
Tamarind. Yes, yes.
It's really good.
It's a nice
so
flavor.
zesty. So she stuffed it with rice and meat, and what does she roulette, and then she make tamarind sauce, and it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. It's a vegetarian dish, 100%.
And do you have one of those nifty coras that you put in from the top? I've seen it. I bought one in Syria actually. I think I've lost it. For zucchinis, it's very good, isn't it?
I'll show you. I have lots of them, different sizes. So we do the zucchini, we do the eggplants, small eggplants. We stuff the cabbage, we stuff the wine leaves. What else we stuff? Everything. Carrots, tomatoes, peppers, black, green pepper. It's really capsicum. All of the kind. It's really, really good. Even the onion. We stuff the onion.
That's good. Going back to eggplant, we've become a bit more worldly in Australia now. It used to be, well, I remember actually when my mother bought the first eggplant from a Greek greengrocer, and she smelt something delicious cooking in the back of the shop and said she used to shout at anybody who, in a nice way, but she used to shout at anybody who didn't have English as a first language. And she said, "What is Maria cooking? It smells very good." And it was eggplant, and she came home with one. And this was in the 50s, so that was quite novel. But that was the big purple variety, but now we can get so many other shapes. And I read in one of the cookbooks that I think a very famous one comes from, it's either Nablus or Nazareth. Very famous one, long thin one.
It's called batiri.
Yeah.
Which is really a purpley one, and it's one of the best.
Yes.
What we do with the batiri, we stuff it. We stuff it and then we cook it with rice, baharat, some nutmeg. You just mix it all with a bit of oil. You core it, you stuff it, and you boil it with a really nice garlicky tomato sauce, and it's so yum, so good.
How nice! And you can also pickle some stuffed small eggplants.
We do pickle some eggplants. So there are two types of the eggplant pickles. We get the really, really small eggplants, and you stuff it with walnuts.
Yes.
And lots of chili and garlic, and you put it in the normal oily preservative, and it tastes so good. It's called maglouz. And there is the other one, which is just the garlicky eggplant, and you just preserve it as it is. It's really, really good. There's a lot of other dishes that we do with the eggplant. Lots of other dishes, endless. Literally, like eggplant is always main in our dishes. So we do it. The vegetarian, a bit of the meaty one, a bit of, but like endless. It's an ingredient that is used all the time. And they cook it really differently from an area to an area. So in Gaza, there was a really famous dish called rumaniya. And rumman is a pomegranate, and they cook the eggplant with pomegranate juice and lots of pomegranate molasses, some chilies and garlic, and it's so good. It's 100% vegetarian, but so rich in flavors. It's a bit of chili, a bit of really zesty, sweety. It's so good. It's really good.
Really marvellous. And what about fruit and vegetables? I was here one night when you had cooked a fantastic dish using okra, and you said that you bought the frozen okra. It was so much easier because okra is still quite expensive if it's in the market and it's fresh, and sometimes it's too old and stringy, isn't it? Yeah. So marvellous to be able to buy the frozen.
You can buy the frozen actually from the Middle Eastern shops.
Yeah.
And we call it bamia in Arabic. So, and you just buy the really small okra, and it's not like the Australian big okra.
No.
And it tastes really good, and it's much cheaper than the fresh one.
Yes.
And it tastes really good. Here. But the okra is seasonal. So I remember my mom usually goes and look for the really small okra to freeze, and there are several ways to preserve the okra. Either they fry it with a bit of olive oil, not deep fried, a bit
sauteed.
Yeah, sauteed, and then they put it in plastic bags in the freezer, or they do it as it is. They put it in plastic bags and they put it in the freezer. My grandma, just because the freezer was really limited for the big numbers of family members that she used to feed, she used to dry them in the sun, and it's usually a summer. The season is summer, so like July, August, you get the fresh okra, and they do the whole preservation for the full year. Yeah. Tata used to cook a lot of the vegetarian dishes just because the family is just too big, it's too expensive to feed all of them meat all the time. So there was lots of options on the table, either a bit of eggplant with tomatoes or eggplant cooked in yogurt and some mint. Beautiful, seriously beautiful. Or eggplant with meat and it's just like a stew. Or lots of okra, beans cooked in olive oils and sometimes tomatoes, sometimes without tomatoes, a lot of garlic and a lot of coriander. It's beautiful.
Palestine, being on the Mediterranean, of course, was lucky in that all kinds of people crossed through the land and brought all kinds of different foods, and you couldn't imagine now being without eggplant or tomato or various things that aren't actually native to Palestinian soil. I mean, it's hard to imagine it, isn't it? The Portuguese brought chilies rather, in the 15th century, as they did to India, and you can't imagine Indian food without chili. But where would we be without tomatoes and eggplants? I'd be bereft, quite frankly.
Exactly.
We haven't actually talked about potatoes much, and they're, of course, the same family as tomato and eggplant. There's not so much potato used in Palestinian food, is there?
There's a lot.
Is there? Oh, I beg your pardon.
There's a lot. So sometimes even the kufta, all of the kufta dishes. So we have the kufta in tahini sauce, and then we have the tomato kufta, and sometimes we just, instead of eating it with bread or instead of eating it with rice on the sides, we just put some boiled potatoes, circles, and just put them in the dish. Another famous, not vegetarian dish, really cheap dish to eat is just cubes of potato. You cook it with a bit of olive oil, and then you crack 2 eggs on it or 3 eggs on it, and you eat it with some bread. It's beautiful.
And that would be a nice, quick thing for a family, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We do a potato stew with chicken, lots of garlic and lots of coriander, and we do something called te'laya. Te'laya is you fry the garlic in olive oil, you add the coriander over it, and you just put it over the dish. So we do it with okra stew, we do it with potato stew, we do it as well with bean stew, and with the special here, which I have to, you have to taste it, it's really good.
We've talked about some celebration meals, and you and I have talked about in the past about the fasting for Ramadan, and how you always feel quite exhilarated by the whole thing, don't you? Which for non-Muslims is a bit hard to anticipate, I think. I don't know how I'd go fasting for that length of time. But how do you break your fast at the end of every day?
So it's a tradition, and I think all of the Palestinian families do it exactly the same. We break our fasting with 1 piece of date, which scientifically is really good, just because you take the right amount of glucose that is really good to bring the energy back, and with water definitely. We usually have a soup. There is a big focus on lentils in Palestine, so we do a really nice lentil soup with lots of onions and cumin. It's really good. So we start with the soup, and then the main dish. The main dish can be anything that is really simple, anything that might be vegetarian, or like when we have people over for iftar, we do like a feast of food. It's lots of dishes, mainly frike, because it's our main dish, celebration dish. There's something called uzi, which is rice with veggies and chicken. We do something called mansaf, which is really dried yogurt. that is really strong, but beautiful, with some lamb meat and some rice and and nuts over it. Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting just to talk about cookbooks for a moment, because I think with the advent of particularly books by Ottolenghi and Sami Tamimi, so many people outside the Middle East have become absolutely enamored with the food that you've grown up with. And I think they've done a great deal to make it popular. But Claudia Roden, my namesake, I've had her little book for at least 35 years. It was first published in 1968, so it's been around for a long time. And she really, it's a fantastic book, and she really woke people up to the gorgeous food in the Middle East. I brought you a jar of pickles today, and that recipe comes from her book. These are just, it's a very easy pickle recipe. And she said that her mother used to do it with leftover lemons for a party that hadn't been put into drinks. You just have sliced lemon and salt it overnight, leave it in a colander. I always dry the slices off a little bit, and then you put them in a sterile jar, sprinkle each layer with chili, and then fill it up with vegetable oil, not olive oil. And you need to leave it for about a month until it's ready, but it's ready for you now. But the other books, Jerusalem, Yotam Ottolenghi's first book, which he wrote with Sami Tamimi, is really very good, I think. And that came out in 2012. And then last year, Sami Tamimi, who collaborated with Ottolenghi on Jerusalem, brought out Palestinian, and that is a fantastic book. The recipes are great. Some of them are the same. Hummus, the hummus recipe, for instance, is exactly the same in Jerusalem and this, because Sami is the Palestinian. But in Palestine, there are lots of articles, or pages, I shouldn't say articles, pages about different interesting things, how brave and entrepreneurial but very brave people are growing organic vegetables. They're running seed banks, they're starting cooperatives where women in particular cook and can sell their food. And it talks about the famous desserts from Nablus.
Nablus, which is knafe, and everybody knows what knafe is.
Yes, wonderfully sweet. I think for some of us, a lot of the Middle Eastern desserts and pastries are very, very sweet.
Oh, is it?
But they're very delicious. And then the other book I have was given me, it's called the Gaza Kitchen. And there are very good pages in that too about even more brave people. My one trip to Palestine included entry into Gaza. We were fortunate, but it was a very confronting experience. It was only about 5 months after the awful war that was waged in Gaza in 2014, which the Israelis call Protective Edge. So there were a lot of ruined buildings. But in fact, the most memorable meal I had in that 10 days was in Gaza. It was at a restaurant, but it was fantastic food.
What was it called? Sayadiya?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We had so many different meals. It was just brilliant, and it was a strange kind of ironic twist about why should we be eating such wonderful things here when so many people were deprived. But they're more sort of Western books. You've got some of your favourites here.
So I have the Baladi by Judy Kalla, and what I like about this book, it describes basically all of the cuisines across Palestine. So what people cook in the north is totally different than what people cooks in the south.
Yeah.
So the south is more of the Bedouin taste. The Bedouin culture is so dominant. So it's the really dried yogurt, the really meaty stuff, rather than the veggie stuff. And once you go up to the north, it gets more into the veggies, just because the villagers grow lots of veggies there, and that goes across to the north. Once you go to the sea, so where is Haifa, Akka, Gaza, it's a totally different cuisine, mostly focused on fishes and mostly focused on rather than veggies and meat. The Gaza, the really interesting story is the Gaza is food is really spicy, lots of chili, and they're really famous about having that really hot dishes. Once you go across to the West Bank side, you get a less of the chili taste and a less of the really hot taste, more of Arabic authentic cardamom spices, and when you go to the south, like Hebron and just below the Nakab and the other desert area, you get the less spicy flavors and more of the meaty, preserved type of food. So really, really interesting. And if you go through that journey, I think from the south to the north, you'll be surprised that each of the area will be cooking something totally different, even using exactly the same, let's say, dish name, but it's cooked totally differently across the whole historical Palestine.
Yeah.
And this, I think it's a reflection of the really rich history of that area and the way that people have developed the recipes across.
Yes, and an eagerness to embrace anything new, because in the Gaza book I was very amused. I had to cook some things out of it once for a kind of a seminar that I was involved in, and I just had to provide a bit of authentic sort of food, and I found the Gazan version of guacamole, the Mexican dish, and it's called intabal avocado. And avocado in Arabic, I should have said that the Israelis introduced the cultivation of avocados that was hitherto unknown, but the people in Gaza embraced the taste, and apparently avocado in Arabic means the father of he who annoys others. I love that.
That's so funny.
I think it's very funny. So what were the other books?
So that is Baladi. Dima Hijawi, she's a Palestinian cook, but she lives in Jordan, and she cooks a really mix of Palestinian dishes with international taste, but she has the really authentic Palestinian recipes. I love the flavors. I love her flavors. She's really good. She has lots of talk shows, and she has books in both Arabic and English. And if you follow her on Instagram, or she usually adds the Arabic ingredients plus the English ingredients, and she's amazing. She's really good. So it's another book, and I have my own recipe book from my both tatas and my mom.
Oh, how lovely!
And my tata is still alive, so I usually call her, "Oh, tata, do you remember that dish that you used to cook for us?" And she would just give me the recipe over the phone and just write it down. Just amazing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I've got a memory of my mother here. My parents, I think I mentioned before, went to the Holy Land in 1941 during World War II, and my mother bought 4 bowls. Here are 2 of them. I think they're the most beautiful colours in the glaze. She bought these in Jerusalem, and I'm lucky enough to have inherited them.
They're beautiful.
They are beautiful, and the colours are more subtle than some of the ceramics produced.
So a lot of the ceramics is done in both Jerusalem and Hebron.
Yes.
And they're really famous of ceramics.
Yeah. Well, probably the dishes are nearly finished. So shall we see how we're going?
Now our frika is done. Yum. Just taste it. Here's our fricassee ready. I usually decorate it with fried pine nuts and shivered almonds, and we do that with most of the really fancy dishes. Lots of pine nuts and lots of almond.
And it gives it that lovely crunch to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, really tastes really good. All right, ready to eat. I think we're ready to eat now.
I think we are, and thank you very much, Lama. We hope that all the audience will have enjoyed this as much as we have.
Yeah.
It's been very nice, and we hope that they'll go ahead and cook at home.
Yep.
And then have a dinner for the peace dinner that's part of the whole deal with the webinar. But we've really enjoyed it, and I can't thank Lama enough for her marvellous, marvellous cooking.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Just don't forget to get some yogurt with your fricassee and some bread with your light mandora, and enjoy.
Thank you.